नित्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थं न वेदा.
A very good morning and a warm welcome to all delegates joining us today on this online platform for week 23 Build Bharat Safe and Secure India, a 25-week series which has commenced from 26th of July 2020, a purely knowledge sharing webinar series successfully progressing each Sunday. Our entire team of East Corp Group is grateful for all your interest, support, and time for connecting with us today. We are sure you will find the information valuable shared here. In case of any questions or query arising during the webinar, we request you to please type in using the Q&A option or raise hand. During the webinar, also keep an eye on the chat section for links to view our previous sessions, to register for our free consulting sessions, to join our ECG community for newsletters, case studies, to enroll for our training programs, to enroll for our pocket guides, advisories on fire, safety, and security. We have our group CEO, Mr. Hemant Khadse, who will lead this session. Let us proceed the session with a small prayer.
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Come on, chant this one. असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Very good morning, everyone. Welcome back to week 23 session of Build Bharat. It's been a very exciting journey, a very encouraging journey for all of us as organizer team, and at the same time for people who are sacrificing their Sunday, each Sunday since last 23 weeks, and spending some time and gaining some knowledge and information and wisdom, I would say, so that they can put into their practice. So we really thank you for all your support, time, and encouragement, because without your encouragement, I don't think so we would have continued this series. It's not just one episode, two episode. It's been a very long journey, an entire year we have been with you. Yesterday only we completed our another series that we started in the month of January, which was a monthly series, which was every last week of Saturday that we used to talk about it. And we completed all our 12 episodes yesterday. And, I just shared that feedback on the social media post, what we felt about it. We are right now on the last leg of this series as well. And it's not that easy, even as I mentioned to you, that we can probably discontinue this journey, because I've been so glued on connecting with you every Sunday, so as you, that uh, I don't know, after this, probably in the month of January, after two episodes, we'll feel gap of that Sunday when we begin. But then I think let's have that connection continue in the form of dialogue, in the form of communication that we have. Uh, connect with us in all social media group that we have, so that we will have continuity in some way or the other. But then this three episode, including today, is very important because I wanted to have two things out of these three episodes. One is to refresh on what we discussed, so that you can put into practice all the knowledge, information that we looked at it, discussed it, and exchanged it. Um, and secondly, if in case you have any queries, any confusion, or any kind of an open window, do not have hesitation and to reach out to us during the live session. Um, there are many people who are joining through Facebook Live, but this Zoom, you can always have a privilege to speak up, ask questions directly, so that we can answer it there, only there itself. So, including today episode, I encourage all of you to um, write back in the Q&A option, or raise your hand, so that we can give you a opportunity to ask any questions, query with related to the topic that we have discussed. Anything so far, doesn't matter whether it's a pretty long subject that we discussed, but maybe you had some query with regards to your facility, or maybe in your mind, whatever it is. So that's what I wanted to talk about it. But just to refresh some of the topic that we discussed, and we are going to pick up some of these topics today. uh, when we started this series in July, uh, taking the fundamental elements put together, and how each element, fire safety and security, is in integrated, how it is an integrated approach, how they are interlinked, how they are intertwined, and specifically the organization which are medium and kind of a large size, where essentially they do not have a dedicated resource specialist to look after these three domains individually. So there is always a shared responsibility and shared roles, and that's how it comes the opportunity for you to excel your gaps or knowledge, so that it's not just functional roles and responsibility that you are doing. At the same time, you know what exactly you're doing with a crystal clarity, with a conviction clearly, so that you can look after your facility well, and you can contribute to protect life and property. So uh, we discussed many things, which is there in front of you, but the last session that we are going to connect, that is next Sunday. Let me announce it right away, because it's very important that you know, and you can block that Sunday. Of course, each Sunday you need to come, but at the same time, the last Sunday we will have an opportunity to listen from very senior international personality, Mr. Corey Pitzer. He's from Canada, and he's our business partner, and he's a very experienced professional in safety culture domain. He ignites minds internationally, travels internationally, connect with every almost country in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. So we are going to hear from him on safety culture on 10th of January, that is next to next Sunday, which is going to be our last Build Bharat uh, episode. So save it, inform all your teams, colleagues to join, so that we can hear from him. I mean, he does a lot of paid programs, and it's very expensive to attend those paid programs. But with our request, he is going to be with us, and we can have an opportunity to ask any questions as well on um, last week, that is 10th of January, when we are here. So I thought I'll just importantly make an announcement here, so that you can know about it. So today essentially we will try to cover as much as information what we discussed in past, so that all of us can actually refresh, because not necessarily that we will remember everything what we discussed last or during the session. Maybe some people have missed some of the session, so I wanted to have consolidation uh, today and the next Sunday, so that we are going to have that essentialities remembrance of all the session that we have done in terms of fire safety and security that we discussed. So um, we looked at the strategy, and that's very important element. So what essentially I'm going to pick up today with the time constraint, one is importantly how fire safety security is an integrated approach, how they are linked. That's number one that we are going to discuss today. We'll look at the aspect of codes and engineering, how it can influence your safety as an element, and how it can contribute, what's their role in terms of codes and practices, where it is derived from. So we'll look at that. And then we'll also look at the human factor, which is a key element apart from the codes and engineering that we adopt. If time permits, we will look at the fire strategy element as well. And that's how my aim is to cover these four important topics today, and then pick up your questions in case you have any specific one that we can answer. So that's what today the agenda. Then maybe next Sunday, we are going to pick up the construction and operation phase, where how you need to take care of the fire safety security element, how you uh, look at it, what's a consideration required, what's the knowledge is required in terms of fire safety security when we are in the phase of operation and maintenance as such. So we look at today the planning phase, we look at the implementation phase next Sunday. And then, as I mentioned to you last Sunday, we will have safety culture, and of course we'll have a Q&A with you, so that we can answer it. So that's what typically the agenda of today. Let me just screen off so that uh, you can probably focus on the discussion, so that we'll understand this in a bigger way. So when we discussed fire safety and security element as such, as I mentioned to you, this is an integrated element. Many of us still do not accept this as an integrated, because uh, they do not give that kind of a focused consideration when it comes to resources, when it comes to the training, when it comes to the developing the skills specifically in each domain or each vertical. But technically, if you look at any organization, typically a medium and large size organization, you essentially need to have these three independent operations, not from compliance perspective but from operation perspective. And these three elements are integrated in physical terms, in psychology terms, and engineering terms. Although these are independent, but if you look at it, whether it's a security people who are responsible for only visitor management, checking the people entry, who is coming in and who is going out, that's a dominant role of the security department, or a security officers or security officers which are responsible in the premises. But they also have equal important role in terms of safety. What hazardous material is entering into the plant or premise or a building? What are the nature of the people who is coming in, whether they are in-house people, authorized people, or they are contractual people? Are they conversant with their building periphery or exit plan? In case of emergency, how people are going to behave? Are they trained? Are they informed or briefed during an entry? A lot of companies do follow up of briefing them the moment somebody visitor newly for the first time is entering in, that they get a formal brief at the gate only, that this is our premises, these are the exits, this is the assembly area, and this is how you need to behave this thing. So it's a best practice, but specifically it is been followed at a very large facility, at the same time very highly hazardous facility. But why we need to have a barrier that only and only when the facility is bigger or hazardous we need to have, because accident can happen anywhere, and the facility may have little complex uh, exit plan where a first time comer will have a lot of difficulties, but psychological impact, if you look at it, it is much higher than the actual understanding of person's behavior. Because the moment somebody is entering it and he gets a brief, he will feel safer, or he will feel confident in roaming around or doing the work that he needs to do, if suppose he's a contract employee, isn't it? So this is the psychological impact, and it is an integrated approach. When safety department is going to interface closely with security, then things get synergized. But if safety department is going to work in a watertight compartment way, then probably security will only do their job and safety will do their independent job. There's no synergy, and that's how then a lot of accident happen where they could have avoided just because of a little integration that they could have done easily in their work culture as such. So this is a very important concept that people have to understand. uh, all the organizations, you don't have to wait for accident to happen and then think about it. You can always proactively think about it. And what integration are we talking about? Integration, we are talking about three things. One is people, processes, and system. As I mentioned to you, this safety, security, and fire, specifically people, they have to see that they are synergize, they are talking to each other. When they develop their plan, maybe security have their own plan, safety they have their own plan, fire they have their own plan, how they are merging into one, so that all interdependent points are captured and they have been followed in the form of SOPs. So processes are also need to be aligned to each other vertical. And when the organization becomes bigger and complex, then the processes becomes more complex to comply or implement. So when they have an integrated approach, it could be a disaster plan or it could be a security plan. It must be worked in tandem so that it becomes more effective. System part, I mean, that is the most complex in nature. But if you look at it, system part is has to be integrated. And today in the industry, just because the systems either are in deficient mode or in um, not complete mode, the integration doesn't happen. But when people in the facilities are coordinated right from beginning, when the suppose for example your fire alarm system has been getting installed or designed, rather I would say, at the planning stage. At the planning stage only, when they are coordinated in terms of safety and security team, then it becomes more acceptance systems. They know exactly where the manual call point to be placed, which are the locations where they need to have an assembly area, which are the location where they need to have the horn, or maybe there is a horn come stove requirement where visually people, impaired people, physically impaired people can have advantage of getting that alert in case of fire. So when the design engineering occurs and when the uh, consciousness is taken at the design and planning stage for any systems, whether it's a fire system or a security systems, it becomes uh, more workable systems or acceptable systems at the system. And when you talk about integration, I think integration is the one that needs a lot of coordination, because it is a physical at the same time integration of a software integration. Not necessarily that only the integration is possible through the hardware. The integration is also required in terms of software, and on top of it, the third layer, I would say that it's a humanware. So integration needs all three layers: hardware, software, and humanware. So when it comes to hardware, maybe you have got a fire sprinkler system that needs to be integrated with the fire alarm systems, maybe BMS systems, maybe if you got a ventilation systems, HVAC systems that also need to be interfaced with your fire alarm system, so that your AHU get trip off or your dampers get activated, or maybe your ventilation systems on activation of your CO sensors will get activated, so that your correct ACH will be maintained in the basement or in a car parking area or in any of the area which where you have smoke compartmentation in place. If there is a fire pump in is going to be activated, your fire alarm panel is going to say that okay, fire sprinkler on that particular floor is on. Probably you need to go and validate or check, or maybe automatically the PA announcement can be activated so that people can get an alert if in case there is any system that can happen, or maybe there is a manual announcement on top of the overriding of automatic announcement can be done. People will become more alert. Access control, if you need to switch off or rather activated your fire exit, so that people do not have to use any access card and people can have a free access to leave the place. That activation again can be done with your security access systems, with your fire alarm systems in case of fire mode or in case of any emergency mode. If you have any fire suppression systems, that also can be activated in case of a first layer or second layer of fire alarm indication, so that you don't have to rush manually and switch on the suppression system, which is going to be expensive system, which is going to be very critical system for that critical area. uh, Only integration is the way that probably automation can be done. If you have got a access and control systems, if people are trying to use unauthorized way any door, your CCTV can get popped up. Again, the integration with your CCTV cameras with your access system can be again the way that can be software. Through a software you can integrate many ways. So software today in the world is making a lot of impact, and it is touching the lives, because now it's all artificial intelligence. It's all about the digital era. And today fire and security is going to take a lot of leading position in terms of software integration. You can actually get an alert on your mobile, your iPad or email, so that you can get an alert what is going on in your facility, even though you are not around, even though you are not in a working limit. So essentially integration is the key. And People have to invest using the best practices based on your risk appetite, based on your need of the operation. And it is only and only possible when you have that integration across in the people mind, in the process mind, and in the system mind. And if you look at the uh, phases that we discussed about, planning phase or execution phase or operation phase, when you have that synergy, automatically things will become more easier. If your SOP itself on the operation stage has been derived based on your design planning or your strategy that you have decided, automatically people will start following what is needed and what is required for organization to follow about it. So that's very important. um, and of course, the codes and engineering, which we gave a lot of importance, and I always talk about the codes and standard, that people have to look at this not as a untouched baby, or you should not have that apathy that it's a external job or outsourced job. Let consultant look at what is technically required and let me take a back seat. So this not, that's the reason this webinar that we have been doing and talking about and creating an awareness that codes and engineering is a common entity. It's something that every individual, whether you are a planning person, whether a project person, or whether you're a maintenance person, you need to have certain degree of uh, uh, acquaintance in terms of code and engineering practices. Not necessarily that you need to be thorough about each and every clause of the codes and standard. No, it's not expected. It's not even expected from consultant point of view. But if you suppose are involved in planning stage, you at least need to know what is the uh, code applicability, what is the benchmarking that you need to have, and what is feasible for you to adapt in terms of codes and practices. Because if if benchmarking itself is not known to you, and if you are only dependent on consultant to derive, or even though consultant is um, competent or capable person to derive the fire strategy, but you are not in a position to understand that fire strategy, then again there could be mess. So we have to understand what are the codes that are you going to follow, what's the level of uh, you know benchmarking that you would like to have, either it is going to be only minimal or it is going to be at the global level. And you need to also understand that there is a difference between codes and standard. Many of us get confused and they use interchangeably this word codes and standard, but codes are specifically meant for giving the direction what is been used and where it is being used. So if suppose you are in a hotel building or a school building or a commercial mercantile building, codes can give you answer what are the requirement that you need to follow based on your occupancy classification or based on the risk which has been derived as a course of practice. But essentially, codes will not give you the clarity in terms of how that requirement will be executed. You need to refer the standards, and every system has got a specific standard at a local level, at a global level to refer and follow. So that's what we got a Mr. Sanjay Pant in one of the session, who is Bureau of Indian Standard head, and he talked about many things about codes and standard. Today in India, although it is not uh, very upgraded or a very detailed um, document to refer, but it is not something that you can ignore. Very basic terms, and now they are also looking at a lot of updation in terms of codes and standard. You can refer IS standard, which are freely available, and in fact we had shared the link also in one of the session where you can download all these standards available for India, and go through those standards, and that gives you answer of how. So when you know from a course perspective, if any of the occupancy that you are working in, what are the applicability that is for your facility, you need to know how that application can be fulfilled using these standards. So you need to see and then come up with the specification, because specification is the document which is going to define your risk appetite, your risk standard, what you need to follow. Because codes and standard are generally and usually meant only to give you the basic minimal guideline, because they are for entire facilities. They are not specific for your facility, and your facility might have little complex local variation, which need not to be um, applicable or need not to be referred by specific codes and standard. So you need to see and come up with your own specification which you need to implement, which technically has to be more than the standards requirement and based on your specific need, specific risk. So once you identify hazard, once you get a clarity on the codes and practices, derive your own specification, take the help of external consultant, and then come up with your own specification which is applicable for your facility. And one of the question that came in, I think Mr. Lalit asked me that, okay, we have got a lot of reactors, and how can I refer standard, because standards are just basic minimal. Can I something go and implement beyond? Specification is the one that is going to answer your question, because even in code standard is very clearly written that this is minimal. You can always do more. You can always apply which is based on your standard, based on your risk, and apply which is more stringent in your eyes. So specification is the one document that is going to be your bible, which is going to define your entire fire strategy, your entire design basis. And then of course you can definitely meet the local compliances, act, um, whatever regulation that are going to be as mandatory requirement, you have to follow all those requirements. On top of it, your specification is going to be the answer. And that's reason, if you look at it, there are many systems which are available in the industry, but then those could be not in totality going to be efficient or effective, and there could be engineering failure, or there could be failure to engineer, because you yourself have not identified the correct application. So it's a failure to engineer. You never anticipated what could be the real uh, risk or real solution that is required to mitigate that risk. So it's a failure to engineer. And there could be a failure to engineering failure where a system itself is deficient, it's not core compliant. Like I gave a lot of examples where you have a sprinkler system, but if suppose piping itself is wrongly designed, not adherent to the codes and practices, you may not have the right flow and pressure at the remotest point. So it's an engineering failure. But suppose you have a pump which is already there to feed the water for hydrant and sprinkler system, but if the pump itself is kept on manual mode, and if there is a fire, your pump is not going to be switched on in the midnight, it's a failure to engineer, because you have not kept that fire pump on auto mode, which is the requirement coming in from the codes and practices. So this is very, very important for a user perspective. I'm talking about, you need to see that you should not have any engineer failure, at the same time failure to engineer, so that your system is going to be with you, and that going to be effective only and only when the accident occurs. And there are chances that in 20 years you will not have an accident, but still you still have to maintain the system in a way which is going to be an automatic condition, which is going to be operational, healthy, and live. You cannot have an excuse that in last 20 years nothing had happened, so I may ignore or I may close my eyes, because accident can happen anytime, or accident will never come in your lifetime, and specifically fire that I'm talking about. So it is very, very important that we take care of those aspects. uh, Let me just show you a very uh, important um, video clip, which I think it's a clip that I really liked in terms of lesson that has been learned. So global cases that had happened, and specifically in the US, uh, these are the cases where they have identified the accidents and what are the lessons that they have learned. And today we can always read in the newspaper, in the media, something is going to happen every day. But how many times we take the lesson out of those accidents and try to implement and correct your actions? That is very important. So having an accident is not something crime, but if you don't learn out of those mistakes, that is something which is a concern. So let me just show you this clip, and probably you can pay attention on those content and the dialogue that is happening in this clip. So
deadliest building fire in American history happened right here in Chicago. And there's a pretty good chance that you've never heard of it. This fire is the reason that doors in public places open out. It's the reason there are lighted exit signs and panic bars on emergency exit. It was 1903 at the Iroquois Theater, on the spot where the Oriental Theater stands today. More than 600 people died, more than twice as many as in the Great Chicago Fire. Tomorrow morning, a long-forgotten plaque honoring the dead will be rededicated at City Hall. John Calloway told us about the Iroquois Theater fire several years ago. Here's another look at a tragedy that could have been avoided.
December 30th, 1903. A hint of snow fell on Chicago as a finely dressed crowd arrived at the Iroquois Theater at Dearborn and Randolph. The theater had only been open a month. This was a Wednesday matinee performance of the Iroquois' first production, Mr. Bluebeard. The The cold but excited theater goers had come from all over the Midwest. They came from 13 states and 86 cities and towns. Many had come downtown for a day of shopping and theater.
The audience that was there on this particular date was largely women and children because it was the holidays, break from school, and it was a matinee.
The Iroquois was the newest addition to a vibrant Chicago theater district centered on Randolph Street that included the Powers Theater, Central Music Hall, and the Garrick.
Chicago had hopes of overcoming New York and becoming the United States Center for theater. And the Iroquois was designed to be the equivalent of anything on the Broadway stage.
Marble staircases, elegant draperies, over 200 lamps in the main lobby alone. Really incredibly beautiful building.
But the Iroquois promised more than just an opulent setting for a show.
The architect of the theater, Benjamin Marshall, had said before the theater opened he had studied every theater disaster in history to avoid any problems at the Iroquois, and that in the event of fire, if all 30 exits were used, the place could be emptied within 5 minutes.
Of course, the Great Chicago Fire had just happened a little more than 30 years prior to that and was relatively fresh in people's minds. So the fire safety was an important element.
But in the fall of 1903, construction of the Iroquois was behind schedule for its November 23rd grand opening.
They were under a tight gun to get that theater open in time for the 1903 theater season. A lot of corners were cut, and building inspectors were paid off with free tickets to make sure that the theater opened on time.
When the Iroquois Theater opened, it was anything but fireproof. In fact, it was a fire trap.
It didn't have any fireproofing. It had no alarm box, no sprinkler system, no backstage telephone at a time when telephones were no longer a novelty in Chicago. It lacked all of the basics, and it did so because of the hurried nature with which it was constructed.
So if you look at it here, just want to take a pause here. Hurried, construction. This is the common element. It's not just in India, it's global problem. Because when we have a pressure, time pressure, especially to execute the jobs, we do a lot of shortcuts and we don't pay attention because we don't work on a design board. We don't spend enough time on design board, and then when we have that compulsion or pressure to execute and finish the work, then this is what get ignored, and that's how that compromise happens in the building.
Few weeks of Mr. Bluebeard were a huge success, and the December 30th matinee was no exception. The Iroquois' 1,600 seats were sold out, but more than 2,000 people watched the show.
People were packed in. They were standing 4 deep behind the last rows of seats in the gallery and the balcony. Some people had brought camp chairs and were parked in the aisles.
In addition to the overcrowding, some exit doors were bolted shut to keep out gate crashers.
And as a precaution to keep people in cheaper seats from gaining access to the more expensive seats during the performance, they put up accordion gates in some of the corridors.
So when the fire broke out toward the beginning of Act 2, people were trapped like rats inside this building.
Act 2 of Mr. Bluebeard began with a double octet, 8 couples singing the romantic ballad In the Pale Moonlight.
It's supposed to be occurring under moonlight. So most of the house lights are down, and there is a single lamp about 15 feet off the stage. Actually, it's this lamp right here that is focused on the actors on the stage with a blue glow. This lamp at some point sparks onto the curtains directly behind the stage.
The fire spread very rapidly up behind the proscenium arch. young people, in particular children, sat and looked at this red glow above the proscenium arch, thinking it was one of the show's special effects. But then pieces of flaming canvas began to come down on stage, even as the double octet continued its performance.
So look at the awareness. People didn't realize that it is a fire. They consider some of the children. That's what he's saying. Children consider that this is part of show, and it has exactly happened in one of the Make in India show as well in Mumbai sometime back. And this is a crux of the safety, and specifically in a public occupancy where large audience is gathering. So
Foy, who is the star of the show, emerges from his dressing room and comes to the stage and tries to calm the audience, make sure that everybody knows that the fire is under control. And he also encourages the orchestra, what remains of the orchestra, to continue playing to keep the audience from getting into a panic.
The house fireman, a fellow named Sallers, started shouting for the asbestos curtain to be lowered and for someone to pull the box. But there was no alarm box backstage.
By then, the audience knew that the fire was out of control, and they headed for the exits in a panic. But there were no exit signs. The architect found them distracting. Terrified patrons were blocked at every turn. Locked doors, accordion gates, and decorative doors that led nowhere.
The asbestos curtain finally started down, but then got jammed on a piece of lighting equipment just about the same moment that the escaping cast and crew forced open double scenery doors in the back of the stage, and this gush of cold air rushed in, mixed with the superheated air consuming the scenery loft, and burst under the curtain. You missed many people in the orchestra area, but swept up into the balcony and the gallery.
Survivors called it a giant ball of fire, and many in the balconies were killed instantly. Then the asbestos curtain burst into flames. It wasn't asbestos at all, but a less expensive fabric. Some patrons did find unlocked doors, but many of those were designed to open in, and the crush of the crowd made opening these doors impossible. Even some fire escapes were dead ends.
The highest fire escape had not been completed. In the rush by the construction company to get the theater open, they hadn't completed the stairway from the highest fire escape. Those people had nowhere to go.
Fire Engine Company 13 was just around the corner and got to the fire as quickly as they could.
But as you can imagine, with the crush of people coming out of the building, it's very difficult for the firefighters to do anything about the fire that's happening inside. So really the fire department's effort is really a recovery effort after the fact.
The arriving firemen and policemen, and even some of the newsmen who were first on the scene, who helped effect some of the rescues, were appalled and sickened at what they saw. And many men wept. They couldn't believe it. There were so many young children carried out of that theater that afternoon.
In the morning, papers listed the names of hundreds of victims. Most of the dead were women and children. Many burned to death in their seats. Others suffocated from the intense smoke and heat in the theater. And others, especially children, were trampled in the aisles and hallways. At the exits, firemen found bodies piled 10 high. The official death toll would reach 602, though the actual count is thought to be much higher. In the chaos at the theater and at the morgue, some people wrapped up the bodies of their children and brought them home.
Initially, lots of people received blame for this. The mayor, Carter Harrison, of course, the building commissioners, the building owners, and the building architects all received their share of blame. But in the long run, actually, no one was ever jailed. No one was ever even fined.
You had complacency, you had hubris, you had greed. A lot of people knew about the problems and nobody did anything about it. Justice was not done in the case of the Iroquois Theater.
So this is the irony. 600 plus people died, mostly were women and kids. Very, very tragic, you know, accident that had happened, and it shook up this thing. But again, if you heard it carefully, no one was jailed, no one was prosecuted, and that's what exactly happens. Not in India, even globally, people will find a way. So the important thing here is always that what's the lesson learned? And there could be a lot of stakeholders who are responsible for building the property. Architect is the one that is going to take the lead um, for making the structure fire resistant, putting these passive fire practices. But at the same time, there are many other stakeholders contributing in every way. You know, your design strategy, your egress plan, your interior that is going to go into the building, your assembly area, your fire protection measures, your life safety measures. So there are many parameters which would influence your building safety. And this is a classic case as a public occupancy assembly area that I just showed it up. But it is applicable to large occupancy where you have thousands and thousand people, worker are coming in on daily basis and spending a day and involving themselves into doing a lot of hazardous work, and specifically a textile mills and all. This is the everyday affair. Now how do you plan those? Would you be in a position to say that no, 10 years nothing can happen, so we will continue the same way? Or will you anticipate any worst that can happen and prepare yourself? So this is all about you know, this uh, you know, planning, and this is what it means of codes and engineering practices that we need to have and see that everybody is at par. I think somebody has raised the uh, hand. Let me just ask him to speak. Yeah, you want to say something? Can you unmute, Mr. Sudhanshu? Mr. Sudhanshu, you raised the hand, so I'm just asking you to unmute. Is it by mistake? Okay. Okay, no issues. Um, so I hope this was a really an eye opener for all of you here to give you the message what it means, what fire safety means, and how you can integrate. See, look at the doors; they were locked because of the security issues. But you need to see security should not come into the safety. How are you prepared? Are you going to lock it? But then, in case of emergency, how they are going to be unopened, manually or electronically? So that is what integration means here. So uh, I'm sure course and engineering will give a lot of answer, but at the same time, it is your prerogative what your specification is going to be. On top of it, also, if you look at it, there are many large occupancies where they don't leave it to the specification to come up as the uh, document or roadmap for every building. If they see as a standardized occupancy like hotels, they have got a multiple hotels of the similar occupancy, similar nature. they come up with a brand standard, and that can be followed by many occupancies, many industries, where suppose in a textile company which has got a 4 plus or 10 plus textile plants in the country, they have similar hazards, they have similar risks, they have similar operations. Do they depend on every time deriving the project specification and then start implementing it, or do they have a brand standard? So brand standard is the new element that many big corporations, where you have multi occupancy of similar nature, which actually standardize your entire safety map. What interiors which is going to go into the each hotel building, what is the minimum staircase width that we are looking at, what is the protection given for the atrium, what is the smoke ventilation strategy, how the guest room is going to be designed and protected with the fire door, how your compartmentation is going to be, what is the emergency light that we are looking at, what's the travel distance that any hotel or every hotel should have, what is the dead end that is allowed, what is the exit that we are looking at, what is a sprinkler requirement, what is a hydrant requirement, what is a fire sealant requirement. So there are many parameters that can be standardized if a hotel owner or operator sees that it is going to be the same quality that I'm looking at. And when they have the seriousness about safety, then the brand standard is the key. And it can apply to any occupancy. It could be a school. When a school is going to be there, and I'm sure there are many school trust or operators which they always try to expand into multi cities and multiple facilities. Do they have a standardization on safety parameter also, like what they have for curriculum, what they have for their facilities, their USPs and stuff like that? So be it any facilities, whether it's a residential, commercial, industrial, any any owner, any facility owner, if they kind of have a seriousness on safety, it is time that they need to invest on a brand standard which is going to be unify the entire fire safety security, and they can have a great advantage of making every facility a safe facility. Now, codes and standard is the one thing. There is another element that is important to understand is a performance based standard. Now, what is performance based standard? Let me just quickly talk about it. When your codes and standards are going to pick up the standard occupancies which are common in nature, not necessarily that you will find answers and be into that slot. You will always have some limitation or constraint where you'll not be able to find an answer referring each local codes or practices. And that's how it comes as a performance based design, where you are going to have a risk assessment for that particular area or occupancy and come up with the mitigation plan which is going to perform and meet the course objectives. It could be smoke ventilation, it could be your fire suppression, it could be detection for that matter. Like warehouses, there are big warehouses happening because of the space constraint and because of business requirement. But if you look at their requirement may not able to fit to the local standards, whether it's a ceiling height, whether it's a smoke compartmentation, or for that matter any suppression requirement. Performance based design is the key, and that is given in the course and standard. Even NBC does allow that. Even NFPA has got a lot of parameters where you can take the basis of performance based standard and derive your own specification which will meet the code objective. And the third element, which is the human factor, which I think I discussed about it, where you need to see if there is a fire alarm system that has been planned and constructed and implemented. If there is a fire, that specific horn or speaker is it enough to give that audible message or indication to the occupants that is going to be there with you? Lot of airports, lot of big facilities where you have a constraint where you will not be able to get the occupants notified because of the limitations and because of the human factor. Not necessarily that in the airport people will respond to the uh, uh, horn or sounder when it gets activated. So how are you going to make sure that people react or respond to the fire alarm warnings? Is it only the fire alarm warning in the form of sounder is good enough, or you want to have a very effective automatic and manual announcement which will have a notification to alert the people so that they are ready for the evacuation? And this is the human factor which is missing in most of the business practices, where people have a mechanical system, they have compliances, they have a operation and maintenance on, but practically that system may not work efficiently because human factor is not taken into consideration. And not to say that you assume that every system that you have will be actually working or going to be healthy or going to do exact job what you have planned in emergency specifically. So you need to have a plan which is going to be ready and practical, which is going to make people saving their life and property. So human factor is very very important element in the whole whole academics. And there are four elements which we discussed about this thing. I maybe I can quickly show you that particular slide so that you can understand uh, this human factor better. So these are the four elements that are important consideration. One is building characteristics. What is the building characteristic that you have where system is getting installed? Second is evacuation strategies, occupant characteristics, and fire environment. So when you look at all these four elements and then derive your fire strategy, that is going to be the meaningful strategy for you to implement. Only codes and standard, if you take the basis, may not actually answer and give you the practical fire strategy. When you when you define your strategy, your plan for your facility, it must and must have all this consideration and human factors into the element. So building characteristics varies, the type and use varies. I mean, hotel for that matter is one, but then there could be many uh, characteristics of hotel, whether it's a 3 star, 4 star, 5 star, whether it's a economy or whether it's going to be where you have large bouquet and banquet. What's the dimension of this particular occupancy? Whether do they have a basement, do they have a high rise, what's the travel distance been followed, what's the dimension? Is it very easy to uh, navigate for people to evacuate, or is it complex? Like we give an example of uh, hotel in Bombay, which is historical hotel Taj, which is a very very complex for any newcomer to get out of it in case of emergency. It's a historical building, you have a lot of constraints, but you have to be with it. But then as long as you are able to understand the building characteristics and then derive your fire strategy, that is what it is going to be effective. What's the enclosure of the building, what's the number of arrangement of the means of egresses, whether it's going to be horizontal access or vertical access, what is the complexity of the building. There are mixed use occupancy which is going to be common in India specifically, wherein you expect retail mall on the ground and first floor, and then maybe you have got residences and or hotel or service apartment on upper floors. Maybe there are common egresses. Maybe you got retail shops on the ground floor, you have mall on the first and second and third floor, and maybe upper floors has got a hotel. And the staircase which is going to be from top to the ground floor or final exit discharge, what we call, will have a common exits coming in from hotel and mall. How do you define those? What is the segregation? Whether the egresses are adequate or not. This is what building characteristics means. There are many areas where you expect illumination constraint, like exactly what you have seen in the clip. There was a show which was going on where an entire audience was in dark and only moonlight was on the stage, and fire exactly happened at that time. This is what it means, lighting signage constraints. So how are you going to be deal with that situation where you are able to guide the occupants in case of emergency? What is your communication method? What is your notification appliances that are going to be used in emergencies? What are your fire protection measures, manual, automatic, semi-automatic? Whether does it need human intervention or not? These are the evacuation strategies and procedures that are important based on those characteristics. Like exactly what we saw in that auditorium or theater where panic happened, and there were many doors which were locked, and the lock, that means it was almost like a permanent lock where it is not easy to access. Now when you expect people to evacuate, and that too at a mass, at one go, then how do you deal with it? Are you defining a single stage or a multi-stage evacuation? Multi-stage involves a lot of manual intervention, processes, SOPs. It needs aid. I mean, you need to aid people so that they stay alert, they don't get into panic, and it's a challenging job. But that is what you need to define. What is the strategy that you are going to have, and it is applicable to many occupancies where you expect a lot of people who are trained, expertise in handling those emergency situations. If you expect only fire tender to come and help you, that's not the key. It is your facility, it is your responsibility to aid the people in that first golden moment, that first 10 minutes moment. Because if you fail, then disaster may happen in severity. You have a lot of constraint of people coming out, whether they will come out on their own, or do they need any specific wheelchair or evacuation aid because of their constraint. Maybe there are physically impaired people, there are women, there are pregnant ladies, there are kids. So how do you deal with that? If you have been doing that facility on a mock drill, people are to some extent aware what is the mock drill and how to respond in case fire happens. But if you suppose do not have any kind of a mechanism or any kind of a awareness within the occupants, and first time they have this kind of a incident which is a real fire, how do you expect them to behave? So this is how it is all about your strategies, because people will respond in different situation. And exactly we have seen in this clip, only maximum victims were women and kids. That is also important element that you need to see. Why that particular gender? Because of the occupant characteristics. So you need to also assess what kind of people that are you expecting in your premises, how they are going to respond, what is their behavior. Do you expect from them to travel from one place to a place which is very very long, which is not visible, which is not accessible, or they are familiar to the building? That is again a question to be asked yourself. There could be a lot of culture issues where people will respond based on their behavioral. So human factor is a very important element in the whole process of defining your evacuation strategy. Your only systems, even code compliant system, is just check one done. You still have to go beyond. The whole point of explaining here is that this is what it means, the human behavior. And one of the session that we ran on wherein we looked at the case World Trade Tower in US, what had happened in 9/11, that people didn't respond quickly, even though it was a disaster, it was an emergency, people to have to evacuate it, but people expected a verification, validation through announcement. People always wait for people to guide them, and it is human nature. You are going to wait, you are not going to evacuate the building even though you are in cinema hall, suppose, and you are watching movies and all of a sudden something goes wrong. Do you expect that you will also rush? No, you will still watch, you will still hear, you will still confirm, verify what is it, and then only you are going to respond, isn't it? So this is what the first pre-evacuation period means, how people are going to respond right from ignition to actual the process of evacuation. And that is what emergency management means. It is no more theory, it is a practice. People still consider, sir, आप बोल रहे सही है, evacuation plan किसके लिए चाहिए? Why do you need evacuation plan? Why do you need emergency plan? But this is what it means. Theory is actually nothing but a practice. And unless until you understand human nature, psychology, behavior, and based on which you are not ready for it, then it's going to take a lot of time. And there could be a situation that you will not be able to take all your people out. You will still have some people left in the building, and they will be the victim of it, because you are not given the training, you are not ready to deal with those human factors in the building, so that they are supporting your evacuation process. So this is exactly the human factor is all about, and there is nothing that other than training. You have to train the people, and there are multiple ways of training, I mean multiple ways of educating people. No more conventional method of only PPT running, and you expect that people are going to be trained and expert in managing their emergency. No, you have to be with them. You have to educate every person in the facility, whether it is intern that you have, or whether it's a general manager or vice president that you have. You have to take them into confidence where they are part of the entire fire safety management. And unless until you create that internal talent in-house, by educating them, by imparting the knowledge as a constant journey, people are not ready to deal with this kind of environment. Only then it becomes a safety departmental activity or security departmental activity. That's about it. If you have to go more than departmental activity, education is the key. No more just training. You have to really get that knowledge into practice. And you need to really be ready with that environment where people take the responsibility of their own life. Safety is everybody's responsibility. It's a good dialogue to display or talk. But unless until you are in a position as a safety leader of your organization, inculcate that culture in everyone's mind, and they start taking the responsibility, it is no more your job. It is just a mechanical activity that you are doing it. So you need to have three methods: educational, expert. Get the expert from outside in case you do not have internal, or you may have internal but maybe there are constant. So get those people who will mentor you on and off or regularly. have the fresh blood in the organization, which is going to give you that education, so that people are building that safety in the minds of people. Otherwise, any accident happens, people will automatically learn. But are you waiting for accident to occur and then we learn? That is a question that you need to take. Otherwise, experience is the best example. But even though not necessarily that every example can also give you the lesson learned. I mean, although we have said, we have seen in this video, nobody was jailed, nobody was prosecuted. So I'm sure even architect would have taken some lesson out of it to build this infrastructure, similar infrastructure in the future. But not to say that every architect in that particular country would have learned from that. So experiences does not assure you that you will learn out of mistakes, but there are higher degree of chances that you will learn out of that incidences or accidents. But question is, are you waiting for that accident to happen and then learn the near misses, or are you really practicing that? That's a question. Smoke is the key, and we have seen in this video that we just looked at it. Smoke is the most killing agent. And if you don't manage the smoke, fire may not be that strong enough to kill the people. It is the smoke. So there are strategies, there are methods, engineering methods, but first and foremost, understand the nature. Unless until you understand the nature, you'll not understand the engineering and you'll not believe on technology. So there is always a link. And whatever we are discussing as a fire, as a topic, it is a technical topic, but it is nothing but a nature. Fire is there with you every day. We start the day with a lamp. So fire is always needed. It's a pancha mahabhuta, right? It's one of the five element that is required to live your life. But the same fire, if it is not managed, is going to take your life out. So these are all nature. It's all gift of God. But then if that gift is not known to you, or if you don't respect that gift well, it is going to harm you. So anything that you have in a facility will, if at all there is ignition that can happen, it will generate smoke. But when it generates smoke, you have to see that how the nature of the smoke is going to be, how it is going to be passing through, and then what is that going to be harming to the human body. How do I take that smoke out in case that happens? Because first and foremost strategy is in the smoke management is that first understand what is the accumulation that can happen based on your fire load that you have. So understand the fire load in your facility, engineer point of view. And once you understand the fire load, you know what is the quantum of smoke that can accumulate or generate. And then you need to see that how one can, using the engineer controls, either we apply the method of dilution by creating some natural vent so that the dilution happens and the effect of smoke gets reduced, or I apply a pressurization technique wherein one area I get smoke, I get the air, fresh air inside to build the pressure so that the smoke will not enter to an area which is required to be safe zone. Let the smoke allocate to one area where you do not have a human occupancy, or the area which is under fire. So that is nothing but a pressurization. You create a imbalance in the area where the fire occur, and you create a pressurization technique where smoke will not get in. So smoke will not travel from low to high. It will always be reverse. So in specifically staircase area, it is important in a high-rise building or an area where you have a air-controlled environment or a temperature-controlled environment. You apply this pressurization technique where you can control the smoke entry and the passages where you expect people to use in case of emergency as an evacuation path. You are able to restrict the smoke entry. So pressurization is a very important element in the facility, especially high rise and occupancies where you have large area. Exhaust is another technique which is important, and like typically that we are seeing in the clip in auditorium and all, where even extraction technology is more effective than the pressurization, because pressurization can be only done in a confined area, in a specific area. It cannot be done for a large area. So you need to have the principle of exhaust where you expect the fans to come in place and take the smoke out so that you have attainability. Now entire smoke management, the important element that you have to see that if at all there's a smoke in the area where there is a fire, you have to see that either of these three techniques, applying this one of the three technique, you are able to manage the smoke so that a smoke will not be coming to the level of a human height, which is probably 3 meter or 2 meter, that's all, or get a visibility of 10 meter. So there are rules based on the standard that you apply, or uh, get your performance based design criteria where you define what is the height of the smoke that is getting restricted and what is the visibility that you expect people to be ready with evacuation. So that is what is all smoke management. As long as you are able to achieve that or restrict that smoke till the people evacuate, maybe first 20 minutes or 30 minutes, depends on the size of the building, you are still able to manage the smoke in a way that is not going to harm your human people. Because by that time you expect the fire tender to come and then they will apply PPEs, safety gears, and fight the fire. So these are important element that we discussed, and I wanted to get a refresh on all those points. Of course, I can't cover all 22 or 21 episodes that we discussed, but I tried to refresh important element in terms of egress, human factor, and integration of fire safety uh, as one element, which is very important for users' perspective to know about it. Any questions? Please raise your hand. I will be able to unmute you. Let me read some of the questions here. Um, there was no name here wherein said whether any announcers of fire safety facilities before starting show the pictures such as emergency exits. I'm not able to understand what the question of this. Um, Please recommend to prevent fire in cinema and protection measures to minimize damage and maximize safety of valuable human. I mean, of course, recommendation could be many, but critical element in any occupancy like theaters or cinema halls is important is egress. Once you are able to have that right egress strategy, that people are able to evacuate the theater in time, I think 50% battle is succeeded, because then at least there is no human casualty. What it can happen is only property damage till you are not able to rescue or get your fire tenders on time. So my suggestion, there could be many, but first and foremost strategy that you need to have is egress strategy. Then of course the smoke management, the protection, the passive measures, everything will be part of it, entire strategy. What competency required for fire and safety management? Good question, Mr. Matthew. Um, Again, there is no one single statement that I can answer you for competency required for fire safety management. There are multiple skills uh, required. Now, when you're looking at as a individual, when you're looking at as a department, this thing, but in a broad perspective, as a safety leader, in terms of fire safety management, build the competency of having clarity of understanding what is the role and responsibilities. That is the missing link today. Technicalities can be done, that can be acquired over the years, but the major weakness in the industry today is people do not have the clarity of their roles and responsibility, and that's what we are going to talk about safety culture in the last. But here, any safety manager, if you suppose he's doing the role as a safety manager or leader, if he's making sure that he is responsible not for his own life, but my colleagues, my friends, my community around, and then I'm going to contribute to the fullest, then everything gets changed, because the narrative is going to change your life. So competency is a journey. You can develop a lot of skills, soft skills, knowledge skills, attitude. All this can be acquired, but first and foremost is competency is having awareness of what you do and why you do. If you are able to understand clearly, then clarity will be there, then you can actually acquire and progress towards this thing. So that's not my answer, Mr. Matthew. Whether sociology graduate with um, NEBOSH IGC enough for the profession? Yeah, there could be many. NEBOSH is the one that is getting popular, or it's visible, accessible for many people. But do not restrict. I'm the person who will not restrict to one qualification as such, because it's a comma. You can keep on adding and adding how much you can digest. Okay, so it's a journey, lifelong journey. And that's what I always introduce myself. If I'm a 27 years experience, I'm only 27% field. I still have a gap of 73%. So that's how you need to leave with. But yes, good to start. You can have NEBOSH, and actually technically I'm not a right person to even academically suggest you any courses as such. But for me, learning is a journey. So as you. Um, LMS is learning management system. That's what it meant, Mr. Rao. Um, that's a jargon, but then um, people have to understand the philosophy of uh, getting trained and having that competency in the organization in the form of learning. So, what is your learning management system that are you applying it? Are you only doing a formal, or are you doing it informal? So that's how you need to plan for. Okay, so I think these are some of the questions that I can see on the Q&A option. Anybody wants to raise the hand, they can raise the hand. I can unmute them to have any queries. Um, yeah. So, but then somebody asked the question, learning management. As I mentioned, this is the culture that you are trying to create in the organization, and specifically for a safety leader, it is important that they have a clarity and they develop the skills and attitude towards imparting the knowledge within the organization, because most of the safety officers, fire officers, executives who are involved in fire safety or security management, they always have the wish list to acquire only knowledge to themselves and less to distribute among the teams. And it is human nature. Anything you accumulate, you try to accumulate within yourself, whether it's a wealth, knowledge, or asset for that matter, anything. And that's what the uh, consciousness that we need to develop and understand the purpose of life and this and that. That's a philosophical way of it. But coming to the nature of the leaders, they are not leaders if they don't impart the knowledge to their people. And learning management is nothing but is that you learn at the same time you share. Unless until you share, you will not be able to gain. And this is a process of learning. Exactly what we are doing here is again learning. Learning doesn't mean that only keeping the knowledge with himself. Like what exactly we are doing every week, coming and sharing the knowledge for 1.5 year, 1.5 hour. It's a exercise. It's something that needs discipline. It's something that needs consistency, isn't it? It's not easy job. So that's what your safety leadership means. And today, in those people who are there in the fire safety management, that's answer to somebody said competency. If you are crystal clear about your purpose, what job and role and responsibility that you have, then you will change the entire day in a such a way that you are only and only involved in protecting somebody's life. You are involved in emergency management plan, evacuation plan, fire strategy and everything. But unless until you yourself feel safe, you yourself feel secured, that plan has no meaning. And that's what I always say, that if a security officer, how secure he himself feel in the premises is the key success factor for him being a safe security officer. He himself or she herself is going to be feel insecure in the premises the moment he or she enters in, then that's not a role of security officer that you are doing it. Same thing applies for fire. If you are a firefighter, if you yourself don't feel fire safe, then I think you're not doing your justice to their job. You cannot blame the situation and environment outside. World is a reflection of you. So you need to change yourself, then the system will get changed automatically. So these are some of the questions that I try to answer. Uh, and I think I covered the topic that I wanted to refresh and revisit what we discussed about the integration as fire safety and security as I approach. What's the integration that is required in terms of people, processes, and systems? How human factor can actually add value in defining those fire strategies? What are the codes and practices that you need to follow as codes and engineering, performance based, and then human engineering? Next week, we will again continue the discussion about the operation and execution management, how people need to be aware, what are the considerations required, what are the practices involved. We'll also cover the security aspect of it, specifically risk assessment, and what are the best practices involved in terms of security management. And that's how we are going to conclude this with a safety culture on the top, uh, which is going to be our last 25th week session. So if there are no questions, I Let me just revisit if there is no question left out. Please explain fire load and it's important. Okay, so uh, fire load is a technical term which is defined in National Building Code, also even in Factory Act. There are many codes and standard that you can refer and understand. But in simplest way, let me define you. Fire load is something that you must know in your occupancy. What is the combustibility load in that particular environment exists, or what is the hazard that exists? It's nothing but a hazard identification process. Like for example, if you have a storage and you are storing some combustible, what is the energy that can be available, and in case any fire happens, what is the energy that it can dissipate? So there are table available where you can calculate what is the fire load in terms of uh, kilojoules, and then once you understand what is the size of the combustibility, or any flammability, liquid, solid, gas format, then you know how to mitigate that risk with what system. So fire load is nothing but an engineering analysis of identifying the hazard in your facility in terms of calculating numbers so that you are within limits, because there are certain restrictions given by the codes and practices that you cannot go beyond, or if this is what is available, then what is a mitigation plan that you can have. Ideally, occupancy classification is the better analysis to define the system requirement, but this is an add-on exercise where specifically for a plant and storages, it is important that people still have to understand what is a quantum of load that is available or that exists in your facility. So I hope I have answered it. How to join in next webinar? Of course, the link is available, Mr. Rao. You can, I mean, you don't need to actually have this link is going to be same link for you to join. You get alert, you get a email, so don't worry about any complexities to join us. It's very easy uh, to connect and join us our Telegram group and this and that, so that will be easy for you to understand what to do. Okay, so I'll just you know touch upon the program that we have launched, which are important for all of you to uh, see if they can attend to go to the next level. I mean, it is an option. There is nothing compulsion. There are many people who are aspirant trainers in the premises, but they need to have a skills competency. Like somebody asked me, what is the competency required in fire safety management? And training is the one that is a competency, because unless until you are able to communicate to the team, you are not doing your job correctly. So we have launched this program, Train the Trainer, which is specifically for users, professionals who are involved in fire safety management. That's going to be the key. We are going to cover a lot of topics. Some of the topic highlight that I want to mention here in terms of safety trainer. What are the presentation skills? What are the facilitation skills? Training design principles, program development, content design, training techniques, group facilitation, interaction. So this is what essentially ingredients of it, but we want you to become a very confident and a journey that you want to start as a trainer. This is going to be beginning. uh, you will be able to excel your skills. It's going to be 3 days course. It's going to be exclusively for you, online course. You can join in. We have picked the timing. It's going to be 3 to 6 on 14, 15, 16 Jan. It's going to be highly interacting, but it's only restricted for 30 people. We are not going to take 30 people because then we'll not be able to pay one-on-one attention to everyone. So that's a date, 14, 15, 16 Jan. It's going to be 3 to 6 p.m. 9,900 including GST is the investment for this particular program. uh, Link is available in the chat option. You can do it. Another program that we launch is internal FLS auditor training program. That is for the people who are responsible in operation and maintenance of fire safety management. They need to also have a third eye in the organization to manage the fire safety systems or fire and life safety of your organization. So that's going to be a very interesting program designed to benefit for all the people who are wanting to be an auditor in the organization. Let's understand FLS, audit methodology, skill set required, how to conduct internal audit, what's the element and benchmarking, what's a report and presentation to your key management, what's a reference check. We'll give you a lot of templates and tools to uh, help you to conduct audits. It's going to be 3 days online program. It's restricted only again for 30 people. Um, and of course we'll give certificates. The dates are 21, 22, 23 Jan. Again, the fees is 9,900 including GST. So these are the two programs that we have launched, which is very, very important for a lot of safety professionals to sharpen their skills in training and audit domain. So that's all from me. In case any question left out, reach out to Afreen. We will get back to you with any questions. So with this note, I think I'm extending the time. Thank you so much for your time. Let's conclude the session with national anthem. Thank you. See you next Sunday, 11:30. Till then, take care. Stay safe.